Pay attention to the young woman in the gray hoodie sitting in the lobby of the Riverside Inn Motel on the outskirts of Atlanta. Her name is Aaliyah Jenkins. She's a 17-year-old high school senior scrolling through text messages on her phone while waiting for the one person who has made her feel truly understood in months. Now, pay attention to the man in the immaculate white suit standing at the front desk counter. His name is Dr. Adrian Mitchell. He's 42 years old, a physician who's about to check into room 158 using a credit card that will later be traced to a shell corporation. In exactly 90 minutes, the messages on Aaliyah's phone will be the only clues investigators have to piece together what happened behind that motel room door. This was not a romantic getaway. This is where she became her own last witness. Aaliyah had met Adrian in late June at a career fair hosted by the Atlanta Urban League, an event designed to connect young people of color with professional mentors. Aaliyah had gone specifically seeking guidance on pre-med pathways, hoping to find someone who could advise her on the competitive process of getting into medical school. Adrian had been working the Emory healthcare booth, handing out brochures and talking to students about healthcare careers. Their initial conversation, according to what Aaliyah later told Jasmine, had been purely professional. Adrian asked about her interests, her grades, her goals. He seemed genuinely impressed by her ambition and work ethic. He gave her his business card and told her to email him if she wanted advice on college applications or shadowing opportunities at his practice. It was the kind of networking that guidance counselors encourage, making connections with professionals who can open doors. What started as professional mentorship slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted into something else. The emails became more frequent. The conversations moved from career advice to personal topics. Adrian asked about her father's death, expressed sympathy for what she'd been through, shared his own story of childhood trauma to create a sense of mutual understanding. By mid-July, they were texting daily. By August, he'd invited her to coffee to discuss her college essay. By September, he was calling her his protege and telling her she was special in ways other people didn't appreciate. The transformation from mentor to romantic interest happened so gradually that Aaliyah didn't recognize it as manipulation until it was too late. Adrian was careful. He never pushed too hard. He positioned himself as someone who believed in her potential, who saw her as mature beyond her years, who understood her in ways her peers couldn't. He was patient, strategic, and devastatingly effective. By early October, they were in what Aaliyah believed was a relationship, though Adrian insisted they keep it quiet until she turned 18 in March. "I don't want anyone to misunderstand our connection," he told her. "People won't see what we have the way we do. They'll try to ruin it." It was a classic isolation tactic, convincing her that their relationship needed to be secret, that the outside world wouldn't understand, that she could only trust him. Aaliyah told Jasmine bits and pieces, swearing her to secrecy. Jasmine had been uncomfortable from the start. A 42-year-old man dating a 17-year-old girl was wrong, no matter how mature Aaliyah was. But Aaliyah insisted Adrian was different. "He's not like other guys," Aaliyah said. "He actually respects me. He believes in me. He's helping me get into Spelman." What Aaliyah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Adrian Mitchell had done this before. Twice that investigators would eventually discover, and possibly more times that were never reported. He had a pattern. Identify young, vulnerable, ambitious women. Offer mentorship. Build trust. Isolate them from friends and family. And when they inevitably tried to pull away or threatened to expose the relationship, he eliminated the problem. The emails Aaliyah sent Adrian, later recovered from her laptop by investigators, told the story of a young woman who was beginning to realize she'd made a terrible mistake. In mid-October, she'd written, "I think maybe we should take a step back. My mom has been asking questions about where I've been going, and I don't want to lie to her anymore." Adrian's response was immediate and manipulative. "I understand you're scared, but don't let fear keep you from the future we're building together. Trust me. Everything will make sense soon." At the counter, Adrian signs the registration form with practiced ease, his demeanor calm and professional as he accepts the key card from the clerk. He glances toward the lobby where Aaliyah sits, absorbed in her phone, completely unaware of what he set in motion. Within minutes, they're walking together down the corridor, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders, as she types a quick response to her mother's text, asking when she'd be home. With Adrian, "Be back tomorrow for church. Love you," she writes. She hits send at 6:48 p.m. The message is delivered. It is read. But Aaliyah Jenkins will never send another text again. Security footage from the motel would later show the couple entering room 158 at 6:52 p.m. The timestamp is clear. Adrian swipes his keycard. The door opens. They walk inside together, Aaliyah still looking at her phone. At 8:23 p.m., only Adrian emerges. He carries a large duffel bag that had not been visible when they entered. At 8:31 p.m., his silver Mercedes leaves the parking lot. Aaliyah Jenkins and her belongings are gone. At 9:15 the next morning, when Aaliyah failed to arrive home for Sunday morning service at Greater Faith Baptist Church, her mother, Sandra Jenkins, knew immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. Aaliyah was many things, but unreliable was not one of them. By 10:30 a.m., after a dozen unanswered calls and messages, Sandra was sitting in the Atlanta Police Department's Zone 3 precinct, filing a missing person report with trembling hands. The responding officer took down the details. Aaliyah Jenkins, 17 years old, high school senior, last seen heading to meet her boyfriend on Saturday evening. No history of running away, no substance abuse issues. No reason to vanish before one of the most important weekends of her young life. She'd been preparing to sing a solo at church for weeks. But the official missing person report stood in stark contrast to the person Aaliyah Jenkins actually was. Raised in a tight-knit suburb of southwest Atlanta, she was the steady presence in a household still healing from profound loss. 2 years earlier, her father, Marcus Jenkins, had died suddenly from a heart attack at just 39 years old. The tragedy had shattered their family's foundation, sending Sandra into a depression so severe she could barely get out of bed for months. It was Aaliyah, then just 15, who held everything together. She became the parent her younger brother needed, making sure he got to school on time and had dinner every night. She worked weekends at a local coffee shop to help with bills her mother could no longer manage alone. She maintained a 3.8 gigapascals and sang in the church choir every Sunday, her voice offering the same comfort to the congregation that they had offered her family in their darkest hour. Her guidance counselor at Westlake High School described her as resilient beyond her years and the kind of student who lifts everyone around her. Her focus was singular and unwavering despite the chaos, grief, had brought into her life. She wanted to attend Spelman College to study communications and broadcasting. She wanted to use her voice, both literally and figuratively, to tell stories that mattered. Her Instagram wasn't filled with typical teenage content. Instead, it showcased her art, digital paintings, spoken word poetry, performances, and videos of her singing covers of gospel and R&B songs. It was a portfolio of ambition, a testament to a young woman determined to build a future despite the hand life had dealt her. Her mother, her teachers, her pastor, and her best friend Jasmine all knew the same truth with absolute certainty. Aaliyah would not just disappear, not willingly, not without explanation, not when she'd spent the last 2 years proving she was the person her family could depend on no matter what. While the police processed Sandra's report with the bureaucratic efficiency of a system that sees dozens of missing teenagers every week, Jasmine was already taking matters into her own hands. She posted Aaliyah's picture across every social media platform she could access, tagged every mutual friend, and sent direct messages to anyone who might have seen her. Within hours, number Find Aaliyah Jenkins was trending locally in Atlanta. Sandra insisted to the responding officers that her daughter was not a runaway. "She's a planner," Sandra said, her voice breaking. "She's been planning her college applications for months. She has a church solo this Sunday. She has a shift at the coffee shop tomorrow. She wouldn't just leave. Something is wrong." The officer nodded sympathetically, but followed protocol. Most missing teenagers return home within 48 hours. They'd keep the case active, but unless there was evidence of foul play, the investigation would proceed at standard pace. For Sandra Jenkins, that wasn't fast enough. For Aaliyah, it might already be too late. What the police didn't know yet, what they wouldn't discover for another 18 hours, was that the man Aaliyah had gone to meet wasn't who he claimed to be. The doctor who'd swept into her life 4 months earlier, offering mentorship and romance in equal measure, was a carefully constructed fiction. Dr. Adrian Mitchell had a medical degree and a legitimate practice, but he also had a history that had been buried under sealed court records and confidential settlement agreements, a history of manipulation, a history of violence, a history of making women disappear when they threatened to expose him. The first clue in the case was the first crack in his carefully maintained facade, and investigators were about to discover that Adrian Mitchell's charm was as calculated as it was deadly. The man who called himself Dr. Adrian Mitchell was not a phantom, but he'd spent years constructing layers of respectability that functioned almost like camouflage. He had a medical degree from Emory University. He had a family practice in the upscale Buckhead district. He had a luxury apartment and a silver Mercedes. On paper, he was exactly who he claimed to be, but the paper didn't tell the whole story. On October 20th, Aaliyah sent another message. "I don't think this is healthy anymore. I need to focus on school and family. I think we should just keep things professional." Adrian's reply came 3 hours later. "We need to talk about this in person. There are things I need to explain to you that I can't say over text. Meet me Saturday, please. Give me a chance to make this right." That Saturday was October 23rd, the day Aaliyah disappeared. While Sandra Jenkins was filing the missing person report, Jasmine was conducting her own investigation. She knew Aaliyah's passwords. They'd shared everything since middle school, and she logged into Aaliyah's email account looking for any clue about where her best friend might have gone. What she found made her blood run cold. The entire email chain with Adrian Mitchell laid out a textbook case of grooming. The initial professional emails, the gradual shift to personal topics, the compliments that seemed harmless but were actually calculated, the requests to keep their special friendship private, the increasing possessiveness masked as concern, and finally, the messages from October that showed Aaliyah trying to end the relationship and Adrian refusing to let her go. Jasmine immediately forwarded everything to Sandra, who brought it directly to the police. By Sunday afternoon, Detective Marcus Thompson was reviewing the emails, and the case was escalated from a potential runaway to a suspected abduction. Thompson was a 12-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department's Special Victims Unit, with particular expertise in cases involving exploitation of minors. He recognized the pattern immediately. Within hours, Thompson had pulled Adrian Mitchell's background. The basics checked out: medical license, no criminal record, respected professional. But when Thompson dug deeper, requesting sealed records and confidential personnel files, the facade began to crack. Adrian had been married twice. Both marriages ended in divorce, with restraining orders filed against him. The details were sealed, but Thompson obtained court permission to review them. The first wife, Patricia, described years of psychological abuse, isolation from her family, escalating controlling behavior that culminated in physical violence. She'd fled to a domestic violence shelter and divorced him in 2015. The second wife, Nicole, had a nearly identical story. She'd met Adrian in Dwatisot, married him in Dwatisot, and filed for divorce in 2019, after he'd choked her during an argument and told her he'd make her disappear if she ever tried to leave him. She'd obtained an emergency restraining order and moved out of state immediately after the divorce was finalized. Most disturbing, Thompson discovered that Adrian had been quietly asked to resign from his position at Grady Memorial Hospital in 2020, following complaints from a 23-year-old medical student who'd been doing her clinical rotation under his supervision. The woman reported that Adrian had groomed her under the guise of mentorship, initiated an inappropriate relationship, and when she tried to end it, he'd become threatening. The hospital had investigated internally, found the claims credible, and given Adrian the option to resign quietly, rather than face formal disciplinary action that would have gone on his permanent record. He'd taken the deal, moved his practice to a private office, and continued operating as though nothing had happened. The medical student, whose name was redacted in the hospital's confidential report, had written in her formal complaint, "Dr. Mitchell is a predator who uses his position and credentials to manipulate young women. He made me believe he cared about my future, but he was only interested in control. When I tried to end our relationship, he told me I'd never work in medicine again if I told anyone what happened. I'm terrified of what he might do to someone who can't fight back the way I did." Detective Thompson now understood exactly what they were dealing with. Adrian Mitchell wasn't just a controlling boyfriend. He was a serial predator with a documented history of targeting vulnerable young women, manipulating them through promises of mentorship and opportunity, and reacting violently when they tried to escape. And now he had Aaliyah Jenkins, a 17-year-old girl with no idea how dangerous he truly was. The detective put out an immediate bolo: "Be on the lookout for Adrian Mitchell and his silver Mercedes. He contacted the FBI to bring in federal resources for what was now being treated as a potential interstate kidnapping case. And he personally drove to the Riverside Inn Motel, the location Aaliyah's phone had last pinged before going dark Saturday evening. The Riverside Inn was exactly the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be found. It was a low-budget establishment on the outskirts of the metro area, the kind with weekly rates and no questions asked. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Shirley, remembered the man in the white suit immediately. He paid cash for 2 nights, Shirley told Detective Thompson. Said his name was Mitchell, showed an ID, filled out the SAY registration form, wanted a room at the back of the building, ground floor. I remember thinking it was strange. Most people want rooms near the front, closer to their cars and the office. But he insisted. Thompson asked to see the security footage. The motel's system was basic. 1 camera covering the parking lot, 1 covering the lobby, 1 in the main corridor, but it was enough. The footage showed exactly what Thompson feared it would. At 6:42 p.m. on October 23rd, Adrian Mitchell checked into room 158. At 6:46 p.m., Aaliyah's Honda arrived in the parking lot. The footage showed her walking into the lobby, sitting on the sofa, looking at her phone. She appeared nervous, but not frightened. At 6:51 p.m., Adrian approached her. They talked briefly. Then they walked together to room 158, his arm around her shoulders in what would have appeared to be an affectionate gesture if you didn't know the truth. At 8:23 p.m., Adrian emerged alone, carrying a large duffel bag. He loaded it into Brend, his Mercedes, and drove away. Thompson immediately secured room 158 as a crime scene and called in the forensics team. What they found confirmed his worst fears. The room had been partially cleaned, but luminol testing revealed significant blood spatter on the wall behind the bed and on the carpet near the bathroom. The bedsheet had been removed, but blood had soaked through to the mattress. Aaliyah's phone was found in the trash can, smashed beyond repair. Most chilling, investigators found a handwritten note on the nightstand, written on motel stationery in Adrian's handwriting. "I told you that you belonged to me. You should have listened." By Monday morning, Adrian Mitchell's face was on every news channel in Georgia. The story had everything the media loved: a predatory doctor, a missing teenager, a secret relationship, and mounting evidence of violence. The FBI joined the investigation, bringing federal resources and interstate jurisdiction. An arrest warrant was issued for kidnapping, aggravated assault, and evidence tampering. But Adrian Mitchell had vanished. His Mercedes was found abandoned in a Walmart parking lot in Columbus, Georgia, about 90 miles south of Atlanta. Security cameras showed him parking the vehicle at 11:47 p.m. Saturday night and walking to a waiting taxi. The trail went cold from there. Investigators worked every angle. They interviewed his ex-wives, both of whom came forward with stories that made Thompson's stomach turn. They tracked his financial records, discovering he'd withdrawn $15,000 in cash from various ATMs in the days before Aaliyah's disappearance. They obtained his cell phone records, which showed he'd been using encrypted messaging apps and had powered off his phone shortly after leaving the Walmart parking lot. Most importantly, they traced his other properties. Adrian owned the medical practice in Buckhead, but his personal financial records revealed he'd purchased a small cabin in northern Georgia's Chattahoochee National Forest through one of his shell corporations 18 months earlier. The property was remote, accessible only by a dirt road, with no nearby neighbors. It was the perfect place to hide someone. Thompson organized a tactical team, and they arrived at the cabin at dawn on Wednesday, October 27th, 4 days after Aaliyah had disappeared. The property was exactly as isolated as they'd feared. Dense forest surrounded a small, well-maintained cabin with covered windows and a reinforced door. "Police, search warrant!" Thompson shouted as the tactical team breached the entrance. Inside, they found her. Aaliyah Jenkins was alive, but barely. She was unconscious, severely dehydrated, and suffering from multiple injuries including a head wound, defensive wounds on her arms, and bruising consistent with strangulation. She was bound with zip ties and lying on a mattress in a locked back room. The medical team that rushed in immediately began life-saving treatment. "She's alive," the ComTet paramedic told Thompson as they prepared to transport her. "But if we'd been even 12 hours later, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Adrian Mitchell was found hiding in a crawl space beneath the cabin's kitchen floor. He surrendered without resistance, his calm demeanor never cracking even as handcuffs closed around his wrists. The trial was swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming: security footage, forensic analysis, witness testimony, and Aaliyah's own powerful testimony once she'd recovered enough to speak. Adrian Mitchell was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, aggravated assault, criminal sexual conduct with a minor, and attempted murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At his sentencing, Adrian showed no remorse. He looked directly at Aaliyah and said, "You were special. You could have been something with my help. You ruined everything." But Aaliyah had the last word. Standing with her mother's hand in hers, she addressed the court. "You tried to make me believe I needed you to be successful. You tried to make me believe your manipulation was mentorship. You tried to silence me, but I survived. And I'm going to spend my life making sure other girls know the warning signs before it's too late." 2 years later, Aaliyah Jenkins enrolled at Spelman College on a full scholarship, majoring in communications with a focus on advocacy journalism. She founded a nonprofit called Hear Our Voice that educates teenagers about grooming, manipulation, and the warning signs of predatory relationships. She speaks at schools across the country, sharing her story with unflinching honesty. Her mother, Sandra, works alongside her, helping to coordinate resources for families of missing children. Her best friend, Jasmine, serves on the nonprofit's board. And Detective Marcus Thompson, who retired from the force shortly after the case closed, volunteers his time training other law enforcement officers on recognizing and investigating cases of predatory grooming. The Riverside Inn Motel closed 6 months after the case made headlines, unable to recover from the association with Aaliyah's abduction. The property was purchased by a community organization and converted into a crisis center for survivors of violence. Room 158 no longer exists as a physical space, but it remains in Aaliyah's memory as both the place where her nightmare reached its peak and the catalyst for the purpose she found in survival. Every October 23rd, on the anniversary of that night, Aaliyah posts the security camera image of herself walking down that motel corridor, Adrian's arm around her shoulders, her face illuminated by her phone screen. Below it, she writes the same message each year. "This is what a survivor looks like in the moment before everything changed. Learn the signs. Trust your instincts. Tell someone where you are before you become your own last witness." If this story opened your eyes to the warning signs of manipulation and predatory behavior, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your share could save a life. Subscribe to Last Witness for more crime stories that matter, stories that don't just shock, but educate and empower. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a case that could protect you or someone you love. And in the comments below, tell us, have you or someone you know experienced similar red flags in a relationship? Let's create a community where we look out for each other. Because sometimes, awareness is the difference between becoming a victim and becoming a survivor. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, you are never alone.